Welcome to Season 6 of the Charity Matters podcast. I'm Heidi Johnson, nonprofit founder, lifelong helper, and your host. I've been interviewing these modern-day heroes for over a decade with my blog, and I'm so excited to be sharing these inspiring conversations with our podcast. Join me as we learn the challenges and stories of innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern-day heroes who set out to solve the problems of humanity. Did you know that some housing reports say there are over 6 million unhoused or homeless people in the United States? Today's guest is no stranger to this fact. You may remember Kevin Adler, the founder of Miracle Messages, who was in a previous episode. I'm so excited to catch up with Kevin to find out what's been happening and share his amazing journey in our conversation about the beautiful work he's doing to reunite homeless and their families, and how he's making a huge difference in our world. You're not going to want to miss it. Hi, Kevin. I'm so excited to have you join us today. Welcome back. Yet you haven't been here since episode 36, and you're back, and we're so excited to catch up and find out what's going on with you.
It's great to be back. 36 episodes is too many to go without spending some time together. We could even do that when we're not recording next time.
I know.
I love our conversations. So.
Well, we had such a great conversation last time, and I know a lot of people have heard it, but we're going to do a little bit of refresher for people that aren't familiar with your incredible work with the homeless and your beautiful stories, which I have to say, I've interviewed a lot of homeless nonprofits over the years, and people ask me about the topic all the time, and I always go back to you because I really truly believe that what you are doing and the way you're approaching this is the only way I've ever heard that makes any sense. It's just it comes from the heart, and so I'm really excited to share this with everyone today, and also to tell them about all the great things that have been happening since episode 36 with you, including a new wife. Congratulations. Oh my God, and a ring. I have new headphones, and you have a wedding ring. So congratulations. and a bride.
It helps it's a good sound in both cases. It's very nice. Yeah, I'm very grateful. My wife, Taja, and I have a pandemic love story. And on our third anniversary, we eloped, and then we'll have our wedding next year in 2024.
Oh, that's so great. So great. Oh,
just I have a photo too.
Oh, look at that. See? Yeah. Sorry for everyone who's listening. You can't see beautiful. Oh, that's gorgeous. You guys are missing out. You guys are a beautiful couple. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay, so for those people that aren't familiar with the amazing work that Miracle Messages does, why don't you share with our audience what Miracle Messages does?
Absolutely. So Miracle Messages is a nonprofit organization that I started about 10 years ago in honor of my uncle, who had been experiencing homelessness for about 30 years in Santa Cruz. Our work really is focused on what we call relational poverty as an overlooked form of poverty, meaning isolation, loneliness, disconnectedness, and often a stigma and a shame that accompanies that. And so what we do at Miracle Messages is we help our neighbors experiencing homelessness rebuild their social support systems and their financial security. And the three ways we do that. So first, we offer a family and friend reunification services. So many of our neighbors experiencing homelessness are disconnected from their loved ones. And sometimes that's not by choice, but because of digital literacy or access barriers, phone numbers changing, bureaucratic barriers where shelters cannot confirm or deny whether someone's at a facility under HIPAA laws. So you end up with missing person flyers on the bulletin boards. But biggest of all reason is the emotional barriers of shame, self-loathing, stigma. So we have, through our network of volunteer digital detectives, we have helped reunite about 800 individuals with their loved ones, finding the families, delivering messages, and helping them reconnect. And then our second program is because we do know that for some people, family may not be part of the solution, but maybe part of a problem.
Right.
Perhaps not have many more resources than the unhoused individual. So that's where we launched our volunteer phone buddy program, where we have volunteers now all over the world, from Malaysia to the United Kingdom, Germany, Chile, UK, US, Canada. We've had someone recently sign up from a refugee camp in Afghanistan.
Oh my gosh.
Who basically said, "Hey, I know what it's like to feel displaced. I'd love to help."
I love
and so
that.
we connect them with unhoused neighbors in the U.S. for 30 minutes a week, phone calls, text messages, one-to-one, kind of like a big brothers, big sisters for unhoused individuals. And then through that program and the relationships and the trust that was really built, we launched our third and most recent program, and that's our direct cash giving program, where initially we picked 14 individuals in our Phone Buddy program who had been nominated by their friends, the volunteers, to receive $500 a month for 6 months, no strings attached. And talk about charity mattering in the life of those unhoused neighbors. As a plug, they used the money better than I could have used it for them. 2/3 of people who were unhoused were able to secure housing from $3,000 over 6 months.
Incredible.
So that basically blew our mind and expectations out of the water. And we now have raised $2.1 million to give out more than $1 million in direct cash transfers, $750 a month for 12 months to over 100 unhoused individuals throughout the state of California, as part of a randomized control trial we're doing with USC and funding from google.org. So
fight on. I'm a
there
Trojan.
You go.
Fight on.
Thank you for the support.
And I'm glad you guys are here in LA, because I know when we talked, this was something you were hoping was going to happen. And like I said, you've been a very busy guy, getting married, writing a book, running your nonprofit, doing TED Talks. You've been you've been a very, very busy guy. But share the story, and we're going to get to some bigger topics here, but share the story for people that don't know about your Uncle Mark, because and really kind of your epiphany in deciding to, I know Uncle Mark's part of it, but also the story of your neighbor down the street and how you got your name. And I mean, I could hear it every day. It's like a child reading your favorite book. I mean, it's the miracle message story. So if you could just share that story for us, can you tell it one more time, just like you sang the song?
Which I won't be repeating today.
That's okay.
Matters.
That's okay.
No, it's good for your listeners. They'll be grateful. So the origin story for Miracle Message is something like this. So my uncle had been homeless for 30 years, and he passed away when he was 50 years old in a transitional housing unit in Santa Cruz. And it wasn't until he passed away, Heidi, that I started thinking, gosh, everyone I'm walking by, that's also someone's uncle or aunt or son or daughter or brother or sister or somebody.
Someone, somebody. Everyone is somebody. That's the shirt marks that Kevin's wearing right now, that for people who can't see it.
Everyone is someone, somebody. And I realized that in my own life, I didn't see people experiencing homelessness as people to be loved. I saw them as problems to be solved. Right. And that was a limitation in my own humanity and compassion. So I was at the gravesite of my uncle with my dad and having a really powerful father-son conversation just about, the idea of legacy, of memory, that here's this person who meant so much to us. What was the significance of having this plot of land where his name would live on? And, my dad shared that, here's a person who his younger brother never had a place of his own in this life, and to then in death have what he lacked in life. And I was touched by that sentiment. It was, it really hit a chord, but it did feel like something was lacking in it, because I said, gosh, this gravesite, all the good years are in the dash, the birth and death and like the dash in between. And it's like the story, the color, why Mark meant something to me beyond just the blood tie was who he was as a person. And so I started just thinking in the car as we drove away, like, gosh, I use social media to share stories in my life and to catch up with friends about their life and their stories. Is there a way we could use social media and storytelling tools like it to help people like my Uncle Mark in life share their stories in a way that we shouldn't have to wait till, they pass away.
Right.
And so I was sitting in church a few weeks later, and the pastor, had this prompt, which was, who is Jesus? And the question was meant to invite us as congregants to answer it with some kind of art form. So a lot of people were like, oh, I'm going to write a song that answers this question. And as you and I now both know, Heidi, I can't sing. and some people are going to draw pictures and paint pictures, and I can't paint.
Right.
So then this question on my heart that really opened this workup was, well, how would Jesus use a smartphone? How would Jesus use social media?
Great question.
And
great question.
It just hit it from above, because that just timing, it went right to my heart. And my response to it, after thinking about it a little bit, was over a course of a year to invite, ended up being 24 individuals experiencing homelessness to wear GoPro cameras around their chests and narrate their experience of what life is like on the street. And the basic premise was, hey, I just walked by you. You're still here. What's it like to be you? Like, what do you wish people like me, passersby, knew about your life, your day-to-day reality that maybe we don't?
Right. Things we think that we never ask because we just walk by, because we don't know what to say and we don't know what to do.
We don't know what to say. Yeah, when we walk by.
When we walk by. Well, we're going to get to that. A great title for a book, by the way, Kevin.
Thanks, Heidi. So I had 24 courageous individuals wear the camera, and I watched dozens and dozens of hours of footage, and it was heartbreaking. I'd see my new unhoused friends scorned, pitied, looked down upon, but mostly just ignored.
Ignored, right.
Yeah. And but there were two real insights from the footage. So one was every time I'd see a child walk by, they'd look back, they'd stare, they'd point, they'd tug on mom or dad, and they'd say, why is that man on the street? Like it's some form of that.
Right.
And I'd always see the parent, most of the time, pull the kid away.
Come along, Jimmy. Right.
Yeah. Scold them. What are you doing?
Right.
That's rude. That's impolite. But then you'd see occasionally the kid would almost guide the parent, and the parent would go with the kid and talk to the person. And I think, gosh, 20 years later, who's going to be a more trusting adult? Which kid?
Right.
And what is it that we knew instinctively as children that we've forgotten as adults? So that was like one bit. But to Miracle Messages origin specifically, in one of the clips, I heard someone say something that just stuck with me. He said, I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and my friends.
Yep.
And I was like, what? That makes total sense.
Yep.
And I've never heard any government agency or service provider articulate that.
This is why what you're doing is so brilliant and makes such sense. We don't even think about our emotional skeletons and our emotional structure and our emotional framework and all of that holds us up every day. I was just showing that my husband was sick and he's going to be fine. But I had family and I had friends and I had all these people saying, hey, we're going to the hospital for a couple of days. Can you watch a dog? Da, 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 all the stuff. And you don't think about it because we just have it, right? You don't think about it like everything until you don't.
That's so well said. And what I've learned over the years is with 1 out of 2 Americans a paycheck away from not being able to pay rent,
Yeah.
And 40 something percent of people self-reporting that they don't know where they'd get $400 for an unexpected emergency. It's actually surprising there's not tens of millions of people experiencing homelessness. Why aren't there more people who are unhoused?
Well,
And
and I was, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I was
yeah,
reading your book last night. As I said, I'm not quite done, and we're really
yeah,
excited to talk about Kevin's new book in a little minute. But the number that you mentioned, well, you had a couple numbers, but one of them that was real interesting was, I mean, 6 million. Some reports are saying 6 million in the United States homeless. And that's not counting our new migrant population. That's
well,
just, this
yeah.
is older data. This is 2 years old data, maybe.
Yeah, we
So,
think over the course of a year, a closer estimate to the number of people who experience homelessness at some point in the year, doesn't mean they're homeless the entire year,
okay.
is closer to 6 million.
It's amazing.
And what we're finding is that number would be, 10 times larger if it weren't for family, friends, community, church, synagogue,
Right.
mosque, like informal economy,
Right.
community
Friends
making up that
couch
difference. Yeah,
surfing. I mean, and
100%. Doubled
right.
up, tripled up. Yeah,
Right. Because everybody has a moment in their life where they're like, "Hey, can I crash here for a couple weeks?" Or, we all have those like 20 something, like
yeah,
I'm between places, or my lease
yeah,
expired, or whatever. But but that is not what we're talking about today. That is, I mean, that you may be kind of unhoused, but that you still have all the emotional support. You still have a friend, you still have family, you still have resources. That's what we're talking about.
exactly.
But
We're talking about
tell
that buffer that
right.
keeps so many of us. It's not even like, it's like if we all imagined a scenario where that was absent, imagine we were just going through life alone. There's a much higher likelihood that all of us at various points would have been pretty
Oh,
at risk of experiencing homelessness.
100%. I mean, I could think of even times in my life, out of college or whatever, that it would have been really easy. Just starting out, super easy. And we're not talking about kids that are coming out of foster care, and just that
Exactly.
there's so many slices to this pie. Um, but I think his name is
Jeffrey?
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey.
Is
Okay.
Jeffrey your neighbor? Your neighbor that the first
So
person that you
Jeffrey was the first person.
okay,
So
so tell that's my favorite
I'll
story.
share
So
that. So,
so tell
okay.
that one.
So basically, after hearing this idea, I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and friends. I thought, okay, theoretically, I just walk down the street, go up to everyone I see who's visibly homeless, and say, do you have any loved ones you'd like to reconnect to? And so, not knowing what I didn't know, December 2014, a few days before Christmas, walked down Market Street, downtown San Francisco, went up to everyone I saw who was visibly experiencing homelessness, and just basically said, do you have any loved ones you'd like to reconnect to for the holidays? And the first person I talked to is a man named Jeffrey. Initially, I walked by him. He was kind of muttering to himself. He had a bottle of, what I looked like some kind of alcoholic beverage to his side. He wasn't looking like he was wanting to have a deep dive
Right.
into his emotional path.
Right.
But once I walked by him, and then I just felt like, gosh, I said I was going to talk to everyone. Let me go back. And I said, hey, one more question since, before I wasn't getting anywhere. What's your name? Jeffrey. How long you been here? A while. Okay. I then just said, do you have any loved ones you want to reconnect to? And that was the first time, Heidi, that he looked me right in the eye. And he just turned kind of glassy, hangdog, blue gaze I'll never forget. And he just said, well, my dad, Harold, and my niece and nephew, Josh and Rachel, my sister, Jennifer, I haven't seen them in a long time, and I'd like to let them know I'm okay. And I said, well, Jeffrey, would you be interested in recording a video to them that I can then try to find them and deliver it? And he said, yes, I would. So I pull out my phone, hit the record button, and he records this message to his family. And so end up going home, sit on it for a few days, just really feeling like I didn't want to make a mess, get involved.
Right.
What happens if there's a reason?
Right.
But I just was like, gosh, I just feel like this burning hole in my pocket on this video that this guy recorded, and I need to honor it. So I go on Facebook and I do a search for his town in a small little town in Pennsylvania. And within just a few minutes, I find a Facebook group connected to his hometown. So I post the video there with a short note. And then within 1 hour, the video goes viral, makes the local news that night. It's a leading story. Classmates start commenting, hey, I went to high school with Jeffrey. I work in construction. Does he need a job? I work at the congressman's office. Does Jeffrey need housing? Does he need health care? And in the first 20 minutes, his sister got tagged. We get on the phone the next day, and she says, Jeffrey has been a missing person for 12 years. And broad daylight, downtown San Francisco, days before Christmas. And that was when I just said, Jeffrey's not the only one, and this should not be happening.
And she said it was the miracle message. This is like the Hallmark, cue the Christmas music, cue the snow, the tears, the Hallmark movie. Yeah.
She named it. The little town is shout out to my friends in Montoursville, Pennsylvania.
Oh.
And so the alliterative side of Jennifer, I said, well, what should we call this thing? Like, people are asking what's it called. I don't have a name for it. She said, well, people in town are calling it the miracle of Montoursville. And it was kind of like a message that you gave to me. So what if we called it like a miracle message? And I said, oh, that's it. There you go.
It's the best story ever. It's so good. It's so good. And what you do is so good and so smart, and makes it just, you think about as a parent, everyone I see, I think that, to your point, I think this is someone's child. This is someone's relative, and do they even know where they are? And I have friends who have children with mental health struggles, and who are adult children who have gone, missing for periods of time, and they've had that, I don't know where they are. And you cover a lot with being, you're not scrappy and you're not small anymore, but just what you're doing is just so beautiful, and all for aligned with the right things, which makes me so happy. So let's talk about, what do you think's, if anything, is changing in the homeless space? Like, I mean, the challenges in the homeless space never seem to end. The problem obviously seems to be statistically, it looks like it's getting worse instead of better right now. At least at the numbers that I've seen, it's not reducing. At least in Los Angeles, it seems to be increasing. What do you think the big challenges are in your space right now? Or do you think that they're the same or different?
It's a great question. There are some things that stay the same. There are some things that have shifted quite a bit. So things that come top of mind that I think have shifted. Homeless services on the whole gets a very bad rap. And part of it is deservedly so. There's a lot of money. There's not much to show for that money. Mm-hmm. And it can be very frustrating and infuriating when elected officials, when department heads, when major homeless service agencies are saying, trust us, we know what we're doing, when the reality of what you see is so disparate.
Yep.
So I get that, and that's true. That there is some inefficiencies in the system, a lack of coordination.
And it's hard for us as nonprofit people to say maybe the nonprofit isn't the cure sometimes, but maybe the government-funded nonprofit isn't always the cure. I don't know. I'm going to get some flack for that, but boy,
no,
I mean,
miracle messages for the most part should not exist. The work we do should not happen through a small, scrappy nonprofit. It should happen.
I say scrappy with all the love in my heart, Kevin.
Yeah,
you know that.
And I embrace it. Like, we're still scrappy. We're still pretty small too, but we punch above our weight. And we're doing the largest 100% privately funded basic income pilot for individuals experiencing homelessness in the United States right now. We're
because
giving out.
Figured it out.
Well, but we're so small. Like we should not. The government. Any county agency, any city, like their budget for stuff like this a multitude larger than what we're looking at. So what I would say is, I think there's a lot to be fixed within homeless services. And a lot of my critique in the book relates to a paternalism in the system, where we assume we know what's better for our unhoused neighbors than they know for themselves and their family. And I think basic income is a great way to restore dignity and kind of bottom up, human-centered. But I also think it's critical that we have a conversation on the sources of homelessness in our country. Like, every one person the city of San Francisco gets off the streets, 3 more end up on the streets.
Wow.
And the vast majority of those people who get on the streets from San Francisco have lived in San Francisco as house people before they were homeless. The number in California as a state, 90% of people who are homeless in California were once housed in California.
Right.
So then you have to start talking about, the affordable housing, the lack of affordable housing, how wages, earnings have not kept up with housing.
Correct.
The lack of investment in various forms of housing subsidies,
right.
How challenging it is to access those benefits, where many housing choice vouchers go unused because people cannot find landlords who are willing to rent to someone in that, coming out of homelessness.
Right.
So you have that, you have income inequality, you have the criminal justice system, where there's a revolving door where it's illegal to be homeless, and it becomes that much harder to relationships. And, then you have to talk about, I think, the substances that are on the streets. Though it's not nearly as much a causal factor of homelessness as I think people look at. It's very visible. But if you're in a vulnerable situation, unsheltered, homeless, and you're, struggling with you're traumatized, the ongoing trauma, have physical sores on your body from sleeping out, you're terrified of the elements, very easy to try to numb the pain and self-medicate.
And it's interesting. I interviewed, I'm going to forget her name. It's so bad. She runs a youth homeless program. She just went back to England. Terrific gal, in Santa Monica, had a great youth homeless program actually in Venice. And she said to me about the young homeless, which I thought was interesting to your point about addiction. She said, what happens when you live with people that are drinking and doing drugs? When your roommates are all drinking and doing drugs, what do? You're drinking and doing drugs, and you're 18 or 17 or 16, or you've just been kicked out of your home because you're gay or whatever. I mean, who knows why you left home, but you probably left because things weren't great there. Or what happens when you're hanging out with people that are mentally unwell? And when we are products of our environments, right? I mean, we just are. And so her, mission was really to try to get these kids before they were, to your point, now having bad habits of addiction, or becoming, maybe they're mentally not great anyway because they've left an abusive situation, and now they're living on the streets with people that are mentally ill, and that's certainly not going to help their mental health, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your friend is onto something. I think it's helpful to point out, as you and I both know, that the substance abuse issues and mental health issues are not unique to people experiencing homelessness.
Correct.
I think plenty of house people have severe mental health issues
and drinking and drugs
and drugs and all sorts of stuff.
Right.
What is, I think, the bigger challenge is the lack of access to treatment, to support, to our system of mental health care and substance treatment in this country is highly privatized. It requires a lot of resources, a lot of patience, a lot of
bureaucracy. It's impossible to navigate as someone who's. I mean, I was just trying to function through 100%. The ER situation last week with my husband. I'm like, how does someone who doesn't have technology skills, who's older, how do people do 100%. This? Right. And I should be high functioning. And I was like, wow, this is tricky.
The administrative burden is a real burden. So I think that's what's changed to your question is I think their drugs have gotten stronger. They are deadlier than before, if that's possible.
Yep.
But I think there is a growing awareness that the problems that create homelessness are upstream of just the homeless service system. There's things that need to be done in the homeless service system to improve. But we also have to look at those upstream systems. And the last thing that I think is hopefully as part of with this book, as part of the narrative change, is understanding our own role and potential complicity in the issue.
Well,
how does our humanity hit,
Okay, so that's the perfect segue for my next question, because while there's no quick fix, and this is a big, vast, deep problem, as we've discussed, with many layers and many complexities, and even from our conversation last time, I left from, I had a shift in even just saying unhoused neighbors versus homeless, right? Like, even just talking to you enlightened me so much from our last conversation 30 episodes ago. But what would you say to people listening about what are some things that we could do? Like, little, big, I mean, obviously donate, be a phone buddy, but I mean, what are things that people can do? And you talk about our humanity, and we don't want to detach from our humanity because we walk away and we feel horrible. We feel angry, we feel sad, we feel frustrated, we feel depressed, we feel helpless, we feel such a surge of emotions, because we know no human being should have to live on the streets, especially in the wealthiest country in the world. We know that, but we don't know what to do. So what would you say? What can we be doing? Little, big, micro, anything?
All of the above. Brian Stevenson has a great phrase, author of Just Mercy, Equal Justice Initiative founder. He says, the importance you have to do is to get proximate. And I agree. And I actually think that doesn't go far enough. I think we have to get relational. We have to be in a relationship. Unless you know someone who is currently experiencing homelessness, you will never have enough insight into the problem of homelessness to be able to make meaningful change. I mean, it's if we think about any other issue, the need for racial justice in our country. If you don't have someone who as a friend or a family member who's African American, who you can have conversations with and better understand what the experience is like,
right?
You're a fish out of water. You're just guessing.
Right.
So I think the first thing is to get to know someone who's currently experiencing homelessness, hear their story, see their humanity, share some of yours, because that's what's taught me everything I know about this issue is just through relationship. There are ways to do that, as a phone buddy, visiting a shelter, connecting through mutual friends, plenty of things we could talk about. But beyond the relational aspect, language is a big piece of it, because right now we have even the language of homelessness. We have defined an entire group of people by what they're lacking in terms of one physical need. You and I would never look at each other as housed people.
No.
Right? Like, hey, Heidi, she's my house friend. She's awesome. She talks to people in the closet. It's really cool, right?
I am in the closet. That is true. We have better sound in the closet.
It's a great recording studio. And I get to see your lovely family
You get to
photos.
see my family photos. It's all here.
So you're not a house person in my eyes. You're Heidi doing this amazing podcast, who has this incredible legacy through that, who has a history and has a family and is someone's daughter and is someone's, wife. Like there's all these identities that when I enter interaction with Heidi, are populated. If we see people experiencing homelessness simply by their lack of something, which is housing, as the homeless, we've already lost the struggle. It narrows what's possible. It narrows our own humanity if we narrow how we see them as humans. So I think there's a language thing, and that's not just like, say the right words and use person first language. Look, the next time you're scrolling around either social media, reading an article from a local newspaper, catch any reference to homelessness, and I almost guarantee you it's not going to be like people experiencing homelessness, neighbors experiencing homelessness, unhoused neighbors. It's going to be
No,
the homeless.
the homeless. Right.
And group people like the mother with a child escaping domestic violence situation,
Right.
the LGBTQ youth leaving a home situation, someone who just had a loved one pass away and doesn't know what to do, a health issue, a mental health issue, a substance issue, a job loss, all that added in, and just saying the homeless is ridiculous.
Right. Well, yeah, it's just it makes sense, right? But it's because we're so conditioned to hear this word. So this is just how we define it, and it's not, to your point, there's 50 slices in that pie, maybe 100, maybe millions, really. Each person is a different slice and a different story and a different experience that doesn't justify them, being lumped in a pile
Yeah.
of the homeless. So
That's a huge piece of it. So
I think if people could just take that away from our conversation, I'd be so happy. But we haven't even gotten to the best part. Even though no one is looking at this, well, unless we put it on YouTube, I still have to show Kevin's new book, which I'm so excited, called When We Walk By. I'm so proud of you, Kevin. This is beautiful. And to your point about kind of solutions, I began reading it. I'm not finished, so don't tell me the end. Spoiler alert, I don't want to know the end yet, but I love you kind of broke down kind of the basic, pieces of the failed humanity and these myths about the homeless, and that you're really bringing us on your journey because you've spent, over a decade and learning about your unhoused neighbors and now you're telling these people's stories and sharing these slices of pie, these personal stories that are putting us in relationship and on these journeys with you. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write the book, and then share a little bit more about it if you can.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to give away all the little things, but I could share what inspired me to write the book in one word were stories. I have heard so many stories that have transformed my heart on this issue. I could not imagine having those stories just exist in social media posts, on local news coverage that comes and goes, without not only the story being honored, the context being honored, but really the broader perspective of how that story tells us a bigger story that we may not be listening to. And so it really was driven by, Elizabeth, who, had never experienced homelessness in her adult life. And then she gets the dreaded diagnosis of the C word, cancer of the colon, from a doctor. And she finds herself in her early 50s, not being able to work because of the chemotherapy, no longer able to be with the kids in Redwood City, where she's a public teacher for many years, then not being able to afford rent and losing her apartment of 14 years, and finding herself at a medical respite bed in a shelter, and that being much better than what she was about to face, which was unsheltered homelessness, being at least in a shelter. And she's going through chemotherapy while in a shelter, with people stalking her, making threatening remarks. I mean, all shelters are, on the whole, not places that you'd want to be
right
at all.
Right.
And then knowing that a little bit of basic income, a friendship with someone that we connected to with Joan, that was that little bit changed her life, and that she's now in housing, but not just like a victory story of the outcome. Like, this human being should not be homeless. I mean, no one should be homeless, but
right.
You meet her and you're like, she's a UCLA graduate.
Wow.
She was a nonprofit executive director. She
making me nervous.
She has recipes that from her family, written an account of Kwanzaa in the Los Angeles Times, an op-ed that she wrote.
Wow.
This incredibly talented, wonderful human being. And she's exceptional. Like, you
Right.
know, but there's people like Elizabeth. And even if you don't have the same education or background or leadership that Elizabeth has, I have seen such acts of resilience on the street, acts of generosity.
Right.
When we gave out the money to our unhoused neighbors, at least a quarter of them that I'm aware of made charitable donations, including many who donated back to Miracle Messages.
Which is just the most beautiful thing ever. It makes you want to cry. I love that. I absolutely love that. Well,
So
and
that was it. It was just the stories. And I think the one other piece I'll just mention briefly is that, you know, my background, my first book and my research as a grad student at Cambridge was looking at how disasters and shared traumas can catalyze community, bring people in. You go through a flood, earthquake, fire.
Right.
Now you see people. I've come to think of homelessness as a highly individual, private disaster where we don't see it in the same way as, oh, they just went through a flood or an earthquake or fire.
Right.
But it's actually closer to they just survived this horrific disaster, but we see it as, what did they do wrong?
It's a silent disaster.
It's a silent disaster.
It's a silent, and it's one that oftentimes has, I don't want to say it's always shame because I hate that word, but sometimes there's some sort of pride and ego or pride that we have that it's so hard for us because we've been raised to be so perfect, which of course none of us are. And when things don't go right, to just admit that things didn't go right and we need help is very hard for a lot of people. It's not a natural instinct as it should be to ask for help. And people are embarrassed. And I think I'm not saying a lot of homelessness is a result of pride, but I do think there's some of that happens.
I think that's spot on. And you'll particularly enjoy the section around individualism for that reason, where there's a story that opens it up where it's a unhoused individual who was experiencing homelessness named Linda, and she was in jail and received a letter from her daughter while in jail, basically saying, please come live with us. We have a place for you. Your grandkids want to meet you. I want to spend time with you. We have a room in Wisconsin. Come on up. And she never responded to the letter. And when we interviewed her, she's now got off the streets and is living with them. But it took intervention. And she said, I didn't feel like an adult mom should be looked after by her adult child. Like, that's my job.
Right.
And so we have to get past these notions of, you know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, like, there but for the grace of God, go on. You know?
Right. Well, I'm telling you, Kevin, your next job is going to be writing Hallmark movies. I am so you can pump these scripts out. You have the stories. They are so good. And I'm so excited to finish this book and read it. But just share with us just a couple lessons you've learned, not only in the process of writing this book, but really that all of your new friends and unhoused neighbors have taught you. What have you really learned about yourself, about humanity, about there's so many lessons in all of this. What do you think some of your big takeaways are?
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm a different person having done this work. I think I'm a fuller person having done this work. All the ideas and concepts I had about right and wrong, my values, pain, suffering in the world, travesty, unjustness, as well as the beauty and the resiliency. I think they have names to them. You know, it's not just an idea. It's not a concept. They have names and they matter. And they're friends of mine, many of whom we've lost. The average life expectancy on the streets is, it's like 53 years old. It's 30 years less than if you had housing. And so,
wow.
Timothy and Ronnie and Jeffrey and Mark and, so many others that are no longer on this earth that were wonderful people. So, yeah, I think what I take with me is the friendships, the relationships, the life that they live, the travesty of a system where someone like Ronnie, who wanted to get into housing, never got access to housing because the housing that was offered to him was in an area where drugs were present 24/7. And he declined to move into the housing because he didn't want to relapse on his addiction.
Wow.
Someone like Ray, who was working as a salesperson and had some serious heart problems and breathing issues, could no longer work. And then because of his pride, because of his dignity, he did not want to bring shame to his family. So his family didn't know he was experiencing homelessness, and he just wandered the streets. And, I'm a better person for having done this work. And I'm also a more hopeful person on this issue. I think the people who are closest to actually doing the work and knowing our unhoused neighbors and doing innovative work like what we're trying to do at Miracle Messages, I have more hope that we can actually end homelessness in our lifetime. It's going to take a lot of work, but it's not an inevitability. There was a time when homelessness did not exist in the way it does now, and there will be a time where it will be rare, brief, and non-recurring. And I think it'll just take all of us to make sure that happens.
Oh my gosh, that brings me such joy to hear you, of all people, say that really, and people ask me all the time, like, Heidi, like, what causes you think you're making a difference with homelessness? I'm like, there's only one. There's only one. I mean, I've talked to a lot, but you are, and I'm sorry to all the others. I really am, because you're all nice
I'll give you
people.
the names of some of the other ones. There's some good ones out there.
But you, and I know there's a
part.
lot of people doing great work all over the country, but I love what you were doing, connecting people and building emotional infrastructure and building support around people to bring them back up and to connect them, and to just one connection at a time. I mean, one relationship at a time, valuing that. It's so beautiful. And I really, anyone listening who's looking for one way to volunteer with 30 minutes a week on just a phone call, you don't have to go anywhere. Just you call your person. You just call your person and you start chatting with them and you make a friend. And it's so great, because what happens is you call your friend in San Francisco, you could live in Florida, and you start talking to your friend in San Francisco, and next thing you know, your friend's going to visit San Francisco, and you're like, you got to stop by and see my friend. And next thing you know, your unhoused friend has cookies from Florida. And then next thing you know, the cookies from Florida happens to have another friend who lives in San Jose who's looking for someone to help them out. And this is how we do it. Just one little contact at a time. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So tell us how we can support you, where we can buy When We Walk By, Kevin's new book that I'm holding up for everyone who cannot see it. It's so good. I'm 50 pages in, full confession, but I am so enjoying it. And I never knew you wrote it. This is your second book. So that was kind of a fun fact for me to read as well. So where can we buy it? When is it coming out? I think this podcast is going to air right around the time it's coming out. So tell us where we can get it and how we can support you.
Thank you. It's coming out November 7th.
Okay.
Wherever books are sold. So you can go any bookseller online, in stores. It's distributed through Penguin Random House, and then the publisher is North Atlantic Books. You can go online to whenwewalkby.com. whenwewalkby.com. And there's a pre-order link there. But from November 7th onwards, you can get your order fulfilled pretty quickly. And, I am not making a living off any kind of royalty of this book. So there will, for me, the reason for it is I just am so excited to be in conversation with people who care about this issue, but just don't know what to do about it, or feel frustrated, feel hopeless.
Right.
So my hope is folks, buy the book.
Every human in Los Angeles, all 8 million of us, need to buy this book.
I would be honored from that. If that happens, I'm definitely taking you out to dinner for sure. But even if it's 7 million, not 8 million, I'm just really eager to have people not feel so frustrated and hopeless about this issue. I mean, there's so many issues that divide us. There's so much
Amen.
acrimony and vitriol and us versus them. It's not just homeless housed. Like, we can think of Democrat, Republican, and
on and on and
like,
on.
I don't, but it's
never ending.
Binary. It's just, we're human. We're all experiencing life in this very brief moment together. And my hope is, by reading this book, both on the issue of homelessness and more generally, that this is an issue we should not be butting heads on. It's too solvable. It matters too much. And it's an issue that fundamentally, that's about family and relationships. It's not to say that that's the only solution. Housing, we have to build a lot more housing. We have to develop a lot more. But it's about us being in relationship with our unhoused neighbors as neighbors. And if we do that, I think we're going to see some incredible progress on this work.
Kevin, you are just the brightest light, and I feel inspired by something that I would not think would inspire me, but you have inspired me. This book has inspired me, and I hope everybody listening feels as motivated and excited about this. So where can we find you besides whenwewalkby.com? And then for Miracle Messages, if you want to donate, where should we go to donate or to volunteer for Miracle Messages?
Yeah, miraclemessages.org. Miraclemessages.org. And we right now have a wait list of individuals experiencing homelessness who have raised their hand and said, I could really use a friend. And we don't have enough volunteers.
Oh.
So I really appreciate your call to action.
I'm signing up right here.
30, someone's going to be real lucky.
I'm signing up. They're going to be like, hey, Heidi, I only have 15 minutes and you've been talking to me for an hour and a half.
I mean, I'll just close. I know we're running out of time. My miracle friend, Andres, he is from Honduras. He fled Honduras, both political violence as well as the economic situation. He had small business in Honduras with his family, fled a few years ago during the pandemic to the United States. He ended up at a shelter in Oakland. We got matched. He raised his hand and said, I could use a friend. And we chat in Spanish once a week. I spent a year in Mexico. I'm advanced proficient. I wouldn't say I'm fluent, but he's very patient. And we have great conversations. I think they're great. And
if you understand them, you think they're great.
Yeah. And he was selected for our basic income pilot. So randomly selected. It was just coincidental that we were matched. And then through that relationship and us building a bond, he said, well, Kevin, I want to share with you my biggest dream of all. I trust you now. Like, I'll open up to you. I said, well, what's that, Andres? And he said, well, I haven't seen my mom in 38 years.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, 38 years ago, she fled from Honduras into the United States. I never found out if she made it across the border alive.
Oh, wow.
And we gathered some information and did some searching. And we found his mom in Texas. And we got her on the phone. She was very skeptical.
Right.
Who are these people?
Right.
We get him on the phone. She's still skeptical, asking questions. Who is this? Who's your grandpa? Who's your great aunt? And within 30 seconds, she started weeping.
Oh, you're making me cry, Kevin.
They talk every day now, from going from not knowing if his mom's alive, if she made it, to having this person in his life. And Andres and I, a couple of days ago, he lives in Oakland. He had never seen the Golden Gate Bridge or the ocean. And so I picked him up and we went on a drive. He's recording the whole time with the window down, had dinner for his birthday. And I mean, yes, I know he's grateful for the work that we've done and the impact, I've had and the work Miracle Messages had in his life, but he's affected my life because now I have a friend who it's not a nameless issue like, immigration and political violence and the economic situation in Latin America.
Right.
When I'm reading the news, I'm thinking of Andres. And that's what I'm hoping people really get through this message. So,
Kevin, you are an angel on earth, and you and conversations with amazing humans like you remind me of just the good in people every day. And I will also think every time I look at my phone, what would Jesus do with a smartphone? That question is like, literally, when I read it the other night, I thought it, and you said it again today. I just, even asking that question, what would Jesus do with anything, is probably a good thing to be asking ourselves. But thank you for reminding us what Jesus would do, because you do it every day. It's truly a gift. So thank you.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thanks. You make me cry,
Thank
Kevin.
you.
And
Oh,
write
you're
some
making me
more
cry.
Hallmark
What is this?
movies. Write some more Hallmark movies for us, because they're such good, happy endings. I love it.
I mean, maybe Charity Matters, next one, Hallmark Matters, and you and I together, we take on the Hallmark industrial complex, and we get to work.
We've got some stories we could pump out, my friend. We could make a lot of good Hallmark movies.
We need to get, and we still have not met in person, which is
I know. We got to do that, Kevin.
We got to do that.
We got to do that. All right. Thank you, Kevin, for being the best guest ever. You just made my day, and I hope you made everybody else's. So you guys, buy the book When We Walk By, go to whenwewalkby.com, and go to Miracle Messages and volunteer and donate. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I so enjoyed talking to our guest, Kevin Adler, about what it takes to start a business that truly changes people's lives. I think his comments about finding the humanity in ourselves and in homelessness or unhoused neighbors was so inspiring and true. To learn more about modern day heroes like Kevin and entrepreneurs, or if you'd like to reach out to us, visit us at charity-matters.com or connect with us on Instagram at Charity Matters. If you enjoyed our conversation, we would love it if you shared it with your family and friends. And please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. But more than that, thank you for caring, for believing in goodness, and for being a part of our movement. You are exactly what the world needs more of. And remember that together we can make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. Charity matters. See you next time.